This episode is made possible by audio. Support the channel and get access to my personal choice for music and sound effects by following the link below. So you want to shoot documentaries. Congratulations, you've picked the paradox of the film world. Docs are somehow simultaneously the most accessible and the most daunting films to make. Anyone can pick up a camera and shoot one, but to make a good one is a different beast altogether. If you're new here, my name is JT. I'm a full-time YouTuber, podcaster, and professional internet opinion haver. Over the last decade or so, I've shot short films, music videos, car shows, video essays, corporate gigs, and yes, documentaries. I've worked solo and with teams, shot for my own channels, and been hired by other YouTubers like Wendover Productions and Real Life Lore. I've got a lot of experience with a lot of different brands, and for better or worse, my first love in the film world is documentaries. If you're anything like I was 10 years ago, you've probably got a drive to make something cool, but something keeps stopping you from taking that leap and actually shooting a doc. Well, hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have all the tools and reassurance you need to overcome that inertia and start working on your very first documentary. So, how do you prepare for your first doc shoot? Well, pretty much like you prepare for anything else. You study and familiarize yourself with the medium. What works, what doesn't, what directors you admire have done in the past. Just watch documentaries. You'd be amazed how many people I've met over the years who are adamant they're going to make a great doc, but when I ask them their plan, or their story, or even just their favorite documentary, they go blank. Like it's never occurred to them that they need to plan this huge project of theirs. Now, this isn't to say you have to watch every doc ever made and understand every little aspect of production, but it's just a little bit counterproductive to go in completely unprepared. The old rule of thumb very much applies here. If you want to make good movies, watch a bunch of movies. You want to have an idea, at the very least on a subconscious level, of what makes, for you, a good film. So, step number 1, immerse yourself in the world of existing documentaries. Have fun with it. Jot down ideas as they come to you. See a cool shot in a movie? Note the timestamp and figure out how you can recreate it. Like a particular style of doc? Watch more in that style. Let your mind wander and see what ideas bubble to the surface. There are no wrong answers in this initial step. It's more about figuring out what things excite you and then adding those things to your mental catalog. Before we get to step 2 and the specifics of preparing for your shoot, I want to take a quick moment to thank my channel sponsor, Audio. Documentary shoots can be expensive, but your soundtrack doesn't have to be. I've used a lot of music libraries over the years, but for me, the best bang for your buck is Audio. Audio is my one-stop shop for all the music and sound effects I use across all my projects. There are a couple things that set them apart. For one, the price. Nothing comes close to Audio in that regard. Their lifetime membership is the same cost as some services' annual plan. But beyond that, they have an amazing library of tracks, with more being added all the time. Good music and sound effects are a cheat code for making the viewer feel a certain way. They're the key to pacing, feel, and emotional impact. They've also just announced that you can now download stems for every single track on the platform. This is huge. A lot of times you don't want the full mix of a song. Maybe you just need the synth, or the drums, or you just don't want the vocals. With Audio's new elements, you can download whatever pieces of the track you want and manipulate them independently in your project. There are plenty of other options out there, but personally, I cannot recommend Audio highly enough. As a little thank you to fans of my work, Audio is currently offering 70% off your first year of the Pro plan when you use the code CHAPMAN70 at checkout. Give it a try. I promise you'll love it as much as I do. Okay, back to the video. Step 2 is where things get a bit more serious. This is where planning really becomes critical. So at this point, you've got a good idea of what vibe you're going for, maybe a few shots you want to try, maybe a mood board of things you like about various films. Now you have to synthesize all those abstract thoughts and feelings into something concrete. You have to ask yourself, what is my story? Why do I care about it? How will I present the story to my audience? Day in the life? Spend a month following your subject around? Will there be a narrator? If there's not, how will you share enough information to keep the audience engaged and following along? Do you need to travel? Do you need to hire a crew? What are the safety concerns for the location? There are 1,000 questions you could ask yourself, from the big ones like what's the story, to tiny but surprisingly important ones like where will the sun be when I shoot this interview? The more of these questions you can answer with certainty, the easier your shoot will be. Documentaries by their very nature are unpredictable. There's often no possibility for retakes. You miss a shot in a real life scenario, you missed it, it's gone. Try to anticipate challenges so you can have a solution ready to deploy during the shoot. All of this prep work is part of the pre-production process, the boring stuff you have to figure out before you can get to the fun stuff. It may seem tedious, but trust me when I say it's way better to plan your shoot ahead of time than to realize you need to fly back to a remote location months later to pick up one more shot. Also part of the pre-production phase is lining up your interviews and other talent-dependent stuff. When are people available? Are their schedules flexible if a shoot goes long or you get stuck in traffic? Do they have somewhere you can set up a sit-down interview? I guarantee you'll run into people who say, sure, just come to my local park, or their workplace, or their home, and they haven't cleared it with their boss, or there's a park ranger who says you can't film there, or their kids are screaming in the background. It's your job as a storyteller to make sure all your ducks are in a row logistics-wise. The talent doesn't know what goes into making a doc. They don't know how many outlets you need, or how much room you need for your lights and your tripods. Just make sure you're upfront with them about what exactly you'll need, how long you'll need them for, what not to wear, things like that. Prep your subjects, get any required location agreement signed, print out some release forms so people can't come to you months later and say, actually, I don't want to be in the movie. The more of this you do well in advance, the smoother the shoot will go. Things will always go wrong, and you will have to adjust on the fly, but it's better to have that be the exception than the norm. Okay, let's move on to step 3. We'll call this a different step even though it's technically still pre-production, but it is a bit more fun than meeting logistics. Now that you've got your story ironed out, your interviews locked in, and your travel dates sorted, it's time to think about the tools you'll use to capture the images and sounds that will constitute your doc. Time to think about gear. So obviously, the first thing that comes to mind is the camera. There's an easy answer here, even though you probably don't want to hear it. Use whatever camera you have. FX3? Great. C200? Nice. Pocket 4K? Love it. I shot my first doc with an original Canon 6D, a 24-105 f4, and a 51.8. No drone, no gimbal, no slider, and certainly no $20,000 cinema camera. Whatever you have is perfectly fine. Remember, people have been shooting award-winning movies for decades on cameras far inferior to what we have access to today. And not just docs, narrative films too, or hybrids like the Blair Witch Project. That was shot on Hi8 video cameras. Francis Ha was shot on a 5D Mark II. Upstream Color used a GH4. Hardcore Henry used a GoPro. In the doc world, you'll find an even wider array of cameras. People have been picking up their mom's old camcorder and shooting docs for as long as mom's old camcorders have been a thing. There's nothing stopping you from using a more expensive camera, but don't feel like you need to. Most of the time, you're paying for features you don't really need in the documentary space. Whatever you have is fine. Now, if you are in the market for a new camera because maybe you've outgrown the old one, there are a handful of features that are nice to have in a documentary camera. In no particular order, there are built-in ND filters, reasonable size, professional audio inputs, weather sealing, good low-light performance, and, maybe controversially, reliable autofocus. There are plenty of other nice-to-have features, but these are the ones I would really recommend. Built-in NDs are non-negotiable for me these days. ND filters are basically sunglasses for your camera. If you don't have them, you're really limited in what you can do outdoors or in brightly lit scenes. If you don't want to have to stop down your lens, make sure you have NDs, either internal, screw-on, or in a matte box. Size and weight are surprisingly important. You'll look at a camera and think, oh, 9 pounds? That's nothing. But when you're having to carry that around all day, on your shoulder, out in front of you, in weird positions to get the right framing, that starts to really take a toll. And remember, you're gonna have the added size and weight from all your rigging. Batteries, monitors, EVFs, cables, base plates, rods, focus motors, handles. There are so many little peripherals that will quickly turn your reasonably sized camera into a dense little headache bristling with add-ons. This is especially true of something like my beloved Blackmagic Pocket 6K. This thing is amazing for studio work where I can sit it on a tripod and run it off mains power, but try to rig this thing out to be usable in the field and you're in for a bad time. That's not to say I haven't done it. I've shot some great looking docs with Blackmagic cameras, but if I were in the market for a new camera today, I'd pick something a little more ergonomic and full-featured. Professional audio inputs are also crucial. Audio is half the picture, so you want to make sure that what you capture sounds good. Look for XLR inputs on whatever doc camera you buy. Ideally full-sized, but mini XLR is fine too. If you can put a professional shotgun mic on your rig, you can rest assured you're capturing good audio, at least for what's directly in front of you. Weather sealing should be obvious. If you get caught in the rain, or if you're shooting in a desert, or if you get drenched by a wave, you don't want your camera dying on you. You can roll the dice and shoot with a non-weather sealed camera. I've done this many times, but I'd recommend you carry a plastic bag to cover the body in inclement weather. Next is good low-light performance. If you can pick up something with dual base ISO or absurdly large photo sights, that'll be super helpful in run-and-gun situations where you might not be able to set up lights. And finally, autofocus. Documentary filmmakers are split on this one. At the end of the day, a camera is just a box with a bunch of tech in it. It doesn't really know what you want to be in focus. Are they pretty good these days? Absolutely. I've used face detect autofocus for walk and talk shots many times. 90% of the time, it looks great. But when you're trying to nail a complex shot, there's no substitute for manual focus. In my humble opinion, why not just get a camera that has good autofocus and you can use it when it's convenient? You can always take manual control when you want to. From my perspective, that's a way more pleasant experience than not having good autofocus at all. We'll leave it there for gear. We could talk all day about different lights, tripods, bags, sliders, all the peripherals, hard drives, batteries. There are dozens of good options for each category. When you figured out what camera you want to use, just go from there. There are plenty of specific guides for accessories here on YouTube. Okay, now let's move on to the scary part. Actually shooting your doc. If you want my opinion, there's nothing to be afraid of where the gear is concerned. Yeah, something will malfunction, that's just the law of documentary, but if you've prepared ahead of time, you'll know how to solve these problems when they arise. What's more challenging is the interpersonal stuff. Have you ever interviewed someone? Ever had to draw someone out of their shell to talk about a traumatic experience? What if you've just got a punchable face and the subject makes a snap judgment and decides they don't like you? These are real concerns. Not so much that last one, but the interpersonal aspect of doc work is really important. It's your job as the storyteller to make your talent feel comfortable and respected. It's your job to know when to nod, to smile, when to ask for more information, to ask them to rephrase something, when to let a silence stretch. There are so many little intricacies of dealing with human beings that it's impossible to give blanket advice here. But I can give you a couple tips I've picked up along the way. The first, and this applies to pretty much every kind of doc, is to make sure the talent answers your questions in a way that includes the question in their answer. So, for example, if I ask, "What's your favorite kind of ice cream?" and they just say, "vanilla," think how useful that would be in the edit. Not very. You don't know where that information is going to slot in. It's best practice to make sure every answer can stand alone and provide clear information. So a better response would be, "My favorite flavor of ice cream is vanilla." Make sure you mention this up front and give them an example, because it's not really a natural way to answer a question. Unless they've done interviews before or they're trained in media work, you'll have to remind them multiple times throughout the interview. Be courteous, but don't be shy to interrupt and ask them to rephrase their answer. Another super helpful thing you can do is just make the talent feel comfortable while you're setting up. Get to know them, chat about things they like, make sure to smile and laugh. It usually takes 15 or 20 minutes to get the space set up, so fill it with casual conversation. And by the time you sit down, they'll be way less nervous and they'll see you not as a stranger with a camera, but someone they know and are comfortable chatting with. My final bit of advice would be to know how to deviate from your planned questions if something interesting comes up. If the talent goes on a tangent you think will be useful, feel free to wing it and ask some related questions to explore that avenue. Just be sure to lead the talent back to your original line of questioning so you cover the ground you initially set out to get. Bonus info is good, tangential info at the expense of relevant information is not. Okay, this video is already getting a little long, so I'm just gonna give you a handful of other tips I've collected over the years. And I'm not even gonna touch on the editing process. You're on your own there. I hate editing. I hate it. Anyway, tips. When you get to your location, unplug or turn off anything that makes noise. Fridge, air conditioning, water cooler, anything that beeps, hums, or buzzes. It's a nightmare to cut out later. Turn off overhead lights for your interviews. They're never flattering and they make it harder to get the look you want. Leave them on while you set up your lights, but remember to turn them off before you check exposure and white balance. Don't have lights? Use a window. The sun is a great and free light source. If you've got a C-stand or some tape, put up some sheer fabric over the window to soften the light coming in and you've got a nice natural shot. Have multiple backups of all your footage. Think you'll use 10 terabytes of hard drive space? Bring 30. Do not delete anything from your cards until you have at least one backup. It is the worst feeling in the world to realize you just lost a great interview. Carry some HD powder in your kit. Some people have shiny skin, especially when they're nervous or warm. Hit them with a little powder and you don't have to worry about distracting hotspots. This stuff is dirt cheap and it works like a charm. Make use of little LED lights to add depth to your shot. A lot of these things are magnetic and you can stick them inside a lampshade for a dim, warm glow. Lights are a great way to add visual interest. Get as much B-roll as you possibly can. Anything even remotely relevant will come in handy. When in doubt, people are always interesting. We shot a doc in the Marshall Islands and I spent a whole day just walking around and meeting people and getting footage of what they were up to. Most people are super into it. It's not every day you get to be a movie star. B-roll is incredibly useful for keeping interviews engaging, providing additional information without narration, covering cuts, making montages and interludes, all sorts of stuff. And remember that the average length of a shot in movies is about 4 seconds. You'll burn through your shots quickly in the edit. Get a lot of them. And honestly, that's pretty much it. No one has it all figured out when they shoot their first doc. I know I didn't. Just do your best to prepare ahead of time and minimize the uncertainty. Try to emulate your favorite docs while you find your own style, and just have fun with it. Some of my best memories are from doc shoots. They'll take you places you never expect, and you'll get to meet people you never would have met otherwise. It's a lot of work, but there's really nothing like it. So do your prep work, grab whatever camera you have, and go shoot something cool. If you like this kind of content, let me know in the comments. I'm always happy to expand on this subject. Feel free to ask questions below, and I'll do my best to answer them. See you next time.